Block breakdown is a game that helps students to practice the decomposition strategy to master multiplication. To do this, students play against each other to try and build different sized rectangles and can decompose one of the side lengths to try and fit it on the game board. This game works on multiplication of numbers 1 through 12, using the decomposition strategy, the area of rectangles, and spatial reasoning skills. For this game, you will need 2 different colored writing utensils, a deck of cards with the aces and twos removed, a game board, and 2 gameplay sheets. For this game, a jack has a value of 11, a queen has a value of 12, and a king is a wild card. The goal is to take as many turns as possible. If you get a rectangle that you cannot place, then you lose and the game is over. Block breakdown is played by 2 players. Demonstrating your game for us today is Remus and Katie. The 2 players will play rock, paper, scissors with each other to see who will go first. We see that Remus won. Now, to start the game, first deal each person 3 cards and then leave the rest as a draw pile. Players will each play a card that will be one of the side lengths of a rectangle. Together, both the cards make the dimensions of one of the player's rectangles. Players will take turns building a rectangle for each player. So, when the players choose the card they want to play, they will place it face down on the table. When both cards are placed face down on the table, each person will flip over the card that they played at the same time. The cards that were just played will be the dimensions of the first player's rectangle. This one will go to Remus. The cards that the players flipped were a 3 and a 7. So now, Remus must build a 3x7 rectangle on the game board. To build your first rectangle, you can build off of any corner of the 2 black starting squares. The corner of your rectangle must be like this, so that the corner of the rectangle you built is touching the corner of the starting square. You cannot build your rectangle like this. It cannot touch the side of the starting square. You also cannot build your rectangle like this. It cannot overlap the starting square. Now, let's go back to our gameplay. Again, the cards that were played were a 3 and a 7. Here we see Remus placing their rectangle. Make sure that you are filling out the gameplay sheet. You can do this during or after your turn. In the first column, we write down the cards that were played that turn. The next column, we write down the dimensions of the rectangle. The next column, we will write down the area of the rectangle. If a student is having trouble figuring out the area, they can count the number of squares inside the rectangle. Then, in the final column, we will again put the total area of the rectangle played. Make sure that you pick up another card from the draw pile so you always have 3 cards in your hand. The cards played this time will be the dimensions of a rectangle for Katie. Once again, the players choose a card, place it face down, and once both cards are played, they'll flip over their card. There was a 9 and a 4 played. Now, I will explain where the name Block Breakdown comes from. If you would like, you are able to decompose one of the 2 numbers that make up the dimensions of a given rectangle. Decomposing is just breaking down a number into parts. We can break a number down into any 2 natural numbers whose sum is equal to our original number. For example, if we choose to decompose the number 5, we could break it into the pair of numbers 1 and 4 or 2 and 3. Since the sum of both pairs is equal to 5. Looking back at the game, Katie can decompose either the 9 or 4 that she got for her rectangle dimensions. Let's decompose the 9. To do this, we are going to use the numbers 3 and 6. Now we can see our side length of 9 being broken up into the 3 and 6. Then we see our entire rectangle breaking apart into 2 smaller ones. One is our 3x4 rectangle, and the other is our 6x4 rectangle. Now, let's place our 2 rectangles on the board. Again, we must build off the corner of a black starting square on our first turn.
Let's build a rectangle off of this point. I'm going to build it with 3 squares going up and 4 squares across. Now, I need to place my 4x6 rectangle. Once I have a rectangle on the board, I can build another rectangle off of its corners. So for our 4x6 rectangle, we can build it off of there or a free corner of a starting square. I'm going to build it off of this point.
Now, let's look at how to fill in the gameplay sheet when you've decomposed your rectangle. The first column is the same as last turn. Just fill in the cards that were played. The second column is different. For this one, we put the dimensions of both the rectangles that we built, each on a separate line. Now, in the third column, we will write the area of each of the smaller rectangles on their corresponding lines. Finally, in the fourth column, we will add together the areas of our smaller rectangles to get the total area. Players can build rectangles off of any free corners of their own rectangles or of a starting square. Players, however, may not build their rectangles off of the corner of an opponent's rectangle. Again, players each select a card to make up the dimensions of a rectangle Remus must play. We see that Remus played a jack, which has the value of 11, and Katie played a king. Recall that we said in this game, a king acts as a wild card. The king can be any number, 1 through 12, and the player who puts down the card gets to choose what value the card will be.
I want the king to be a 1 so that Remus can't block me.
Now I have to draw a 1 by 11 square. I think I'm going to draw it this way so that Katie can't draw any more rectangles in this direction.
As the board continues to fill up, there are some rules we have to go over. You are allowed to touch the edges and corners of the opposite player's rectangles. You cannot touch the edges of your own rectangle. You also cannot touch the edge of a starting square. Also, you cannot overlap any of the rectangles on the board, regardless of their color. This includes the starting squares. Now, both players are back to making Katie's rectangle. We see they played a 6 and a 10.
I'm going to break down the 6 into 3 and 3, so I have 2 3 by 10 rectangles. I'm going to put one rectangle here. I think I'm going to put the other one here.
You can't do that, remember? You can't touch the edge of your own rectangle.
Oh, you're right. I'll put it here then.
It is now back to Remus's turn, and they have to make a 5 by 8 rectangle.
I think I'm going to start from this starting square here. I'm going to make it as big as possible because it can still fit my side length of 8. That left me with an 8 by 3. That means that I still have an 8 by 2 left that I need to draw. I'm going to build it off this corner.
It is now several turns later and nearing the end of the game. It's back to Katie's turn, and we see she has to place a 4 by 8 rectangle on the game board. However, she's quickly running out of options. Since there's nowhere on the board for Katie to put her rectangle, she loses the game, and therefore Remus wins!
See the handout for ways to adapt this game for different learners and for teacher tips to help make gameplay a success. Happy playing!